Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Before we start this webinar, which is going to be very interesting, it's going to be on success stories for cacao on the European market, so exporters of cacao that had success on the European market, some general guidelines for this webinar. We cannot hear or see you. What we can hear from you is the questions that you guys can ask on the questions tab. So if you want to participate, you can participate in writing, and there's a questions tab that you can connect through. We do have a few polls that will automatically pop up on the evaluation of the webinar at the end, etc. And for your information, this session is being recorded and it will be posted on the website of CBI later on, and you will get the link for that as well if you have subscribed if you have registered for this webinar. So as I mentioned before, this is a webinar on success stories on exporting cacao to the European market. And we already thank our two panelists for today. Oops. We have Andrés Guzmán from Hacienda Victoria in Ecuador, and we have Simran Bindra from Coco Camille in Tanzania. And I'm here with my colleague Lisanne, and I'm Gustavo Ferro. We're going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to start by introducing our program manager from CBI. She could not be here today, but she is the program manager for the market information for coffee and cacao, Lisanne Groothuis, and she has worked as a trader for coffee for over 25 years. So she has a lot of experience in coffee, but also a lot of experience now in cacao as well. And this is Lisanne's LinkedIn in case you want to connect with her. And just a small introduction also about CBI. Most of you guys might know CBI already, the Center for Promotion of Imports from Developing Countries, based in The Hague in the Netherlands. And well, CBI has as its main aim to support SMEs in strengthening their economic, social, and environmental sustainability through exports to Europe. And of course, CBI also focuses on regional markets when that's relevant. And the main tool that CBI has is practical solutions in order to solve the main bottlenecks that companies, SMEs might have in their value chains. And of course, CBI also works in creating relationships through the networks in the EU and in developing countries. And CBI works across several sectors. I'm going to show it to you guys. And as CBI has observed over the years, one of the main limitations that SMEs in developing countries have is limited access to market information. And that's the reason why the market information department of CBI exists and why CBI produces a lot of market intelligence. CBI has the following target countries here. As you guys understand, some of these countries are exporting, producing cacao, and some are not, but these are all the countries that CBI covers in its mandate as the target countries. But of course, regarding the market information, the information is open for everyone. It's open for everyone's benefit as well.
Hier kom ik dus niet in. Kijk, dan krijg ik dit weer.
All right, so CBI produces market information for 14 sectors, one of them being cacao. These are the other ones. It covers from fresh products until, tourism, fish and seafood, processed fruit and vegetables, very diverse. And the market information provided by CBI includes two main parts. One of the parts is market analysis, where we describe the demand on the European market and some other facts about the profile of the sector, and the market entry part. So that is about some tips on how to access the market, finding buyers, and some other things that actually relate to very practical issues on accessing the market. For the coffee and for the cacao sectors specifically, we are working on country fact sheets, and we also produce fact sheets that are specialized in specific market segments. For example, certification, specialty cacao, semi-finished products, and also CBI is providing the free webinars and news items on its website. So if you guys want to access further information on CBI market information, you guys can access this link that you have up here on the screen. And of course, you all get this presentation later so that you can also have all the access links and all the information that has been provided about CBI. Thank you guys for listening for the CBI part. And if you guys need more information about CBI, you can access all the social media channels and the email from CBI if you have specific questions. Now, moving on to this webinar, I'm gonna leave the floor now for my colleague Lisanne Groothuis to introduce herself.
Yes, hi, thank you all for being here. I'm Lisanne Groothuis, Dutch, but I'm based in Colombia, and I work for the consultancy firm Profound, where we facilitate sustainable trade promotion. We do a lot of market research, we provide support in compliance, and we also facilitate market access activities. My main expertise is in cacao and coffee. Together with Gustavo, we are the authors of the CBI studies, and I'm also involved in several other cocoa projects here in Colombia. Yes, Gustavo.
Yeah, so Lisanne is based in Colombia. I'm based in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, and I have been working with cacao and with coffee for many years. I'm working as an independent consultant, but I'm associated to Profound as well in this project, which is the CBI Market Intelligence. I'm also working across different countries and different types of clients, actors, organizations in cacao. You can see a list here. Yeah, it's usually NGOs, governmental organizations that are looking into designing interventions for cacao, doing training studies about the European market mostly. So this is my LinkedIn if you guys want to connect. So today's agenda, we have two very nice panelists that are going to help us cover the agenda. And we're going to explore a little bit how to establish business relationships in the European market. And then we're going to talk a little bit about complying with market requirements, buyer requirements, regulation, etc. We're going to cover the product and business promotion. And we're going to have some time at the end where you guys can ask your questions on the question fields. And we're going to do our best to answer them. You can address the questions specifically to someone, or you can ask an open question, and we'll try to answer those in the last part of the session. Just also to remind you guys that we have already had some previous webinars where we talked to quite some interesting people in our doing business with European cocoa buyers. And we have had also a session, a webinar session on online tools and resources that included finding buyers. So you guys can find some quite interesting information on the CBI website. You can see the link below. And we are constantly publishing some news items as well. So you guys can, in addition to watching this webinar, which is going to be published on the website, you can also get some other information through what is already published on the website. All right, so to quickly introduce our panelists, we have Simran Bindra from Coco Camille, and we have Andrés Guzmán from Hacienda Victoria. I'm not gonna introduce them because I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, because that's a fair way of doing it, and no one better to talk about their companies than themselves. So first we're gonna hear from Simran.
Sure, thank you, Gustavo, and thank you to CBI for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about our story, and to all of the attendees for thinking that we're worth listening to. I find the title a little bit awkward, learning from successful exporters in cocoa. It implies that sort of we are successful, which, you know, we have a long way to go. We continue to grow, and we're not where we would like to be, but we're working towards that. So yeah, so my name is Simran Bindra. I'm one of the two founders of Cocoa Camille. We work in central Tanzania with a network of smallholder farmers. We buy cocoa from them, which we straight out of the pods, which we ferment, dry, grade, blend, pack, and export to some of the world's best bean-to-bar chocolate makers, including a lot throughout Europe. We started the company in 2013, and we have been growing ever since. That being said, a caveat that I wanted to make was that we're still a small company. You know, we're doing about 300 tons of cocoa beans a year, which I imagine for a lot of the attendees would be a small fraction of what they're producing or the organizations they're working with produce. Our target market has always been sort of the ultra premium high-end bean-to-bar makers. The reasoning being our overall goal has been to put more money into farmers' pockets, and by targeting a kind of chocolate maker customer who's willing to pay more for a higher quality, and with the ethics and transparency behind the value chain, we knew we would be able to pay a higher price to the farmers we're working with. I'm looking at the notes on what to cover in this. So they asked about our main cocoa profiles, the genetics that we have. Our beans are majority Trinitario, a pretty pure Trinitario as per the genetics that we had mapped by the USDA. Our flavor profile is predominantly a red fruit, sour apple, with some hints and notes of brown fruits, figs, raisins, and so on. The farmers we work with are smallholder farmers. We have a network of 4,500 farmers registered with us. 1,330 of them are organic certified, and those 1,330 produce about 90% of our volume. Average farm size is less than 1 hectare. 400 trees per acre, so about 1,000 trees per hectare. In terms of our unique selling points, above all is quality, our flavor profile and the quality of our cocoa. The story and the ethics and the marketing or whatever you have behind it will only come into play once you have the quality down. So our unique selling point is our quality, followed by the ethics and transparency behind our value chain, our supply chain. Any shipment of beans that we send, we're able to provide a list of every single farmer that contributed to that shipment, how many kilos she contributed, how much she received for those kilos, and so on. We know where their farms are. We have GPS coordinates. We know their phone numbers if they have a phone. And so, yeah, having that full traceability. We're organic certified as per, for those 90% of our volume, as per EU, US, and Japanese standards. And we're lucky to work with some fantastic European partners and some incredible chocolate makers throughout the continent. So, yeah, I think that's all I have.
Simran, can I ask you also where the idea to work with cacao specifically came from? What is the passion for cacao specifically that motivated you to actually create?
Well, like almost everyone else, I've always been a fan of chocolate, but that was not the driving force. I came to Tanzania working for an NGO on a cocoa project, and over the course of that work, I quite quickly became a little bit disillusioned, I suppose, with the NGO model, and I wanted to look at building a more sustainable long-term project that had the possibility to provide a long-term impact on a farmer network. And over the course of that work, though, I learned about the history of cocoa in Tanzania. I learned about our unique flavor profile, our organic status. I learned about the opportunity that I learned about the potential that we had in the country to be producing a good quality cocoa bean, and I learned about how we were failing to realize that potential, and that we were losing this potential by poor post-harvest handling. Our fermentation, our drying, that was not done well. The reasoning being the existing buyers in Tanzania were large commodity buyers who didn't need or care for quality. So there's no point telling a farmer she must ferment and dry her beans properly if she's going to get paid the same as her neighbor who does a terrible job. And so the existing buyers here just weren't interested in quality. And so I approached, and at the same time, back in 2012, when I started this work, we were seeing at that point the beginning of this new wave of craft chocolate, at least in my mind, the beginning, which I think at that point was mostly focused in America and starting to spread to Europe. And we knew that there were more and more chocolate makers looking for interesting origins, different beans, geographic diversity away from sort of Central and South America, which is historically where the world's best cocoa has come from, but people looking to go further afield as well. And I knew that we had potential here. We just needed a market agency to sort of realize that potential, to help realize that potential, and to be able to effect change in that way. So that's sort of where our idea came from. Then I approached some of the existing commodity guys. I said, look, why don't we work on segregating your supply chain, something about high quality, where you pay the farmers more, you get charged, you can pay a higher, you can sell for a higher price. And the buyers there said, great, how many hundreds or thousands of tons do you want to start with? And I said, no, I wanted to start with 10 or 20 tons, and it just didn't make sense for them. Tanzania as itself is already a small cocoa producer in terms of global cocoa production, only 10,000 tons a year, and so it wasn't of interest to the big exporters over here. And so Brian, my business partner, and myself decided that we would have a go at setting something up, targeting the premium market, producing a much higher quality cocoa bean, and paying our farmers a lot more.
Got it. So connecting the potential to the opportunity, basically. Great. Let's hear from Andres about Hacienda Victoria. Thank you, Simran. Andres, can you tell us a little bit about Hacienda Victoria?
So hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation from the CBI, and hello to the panelists and the attendees. I am based in Ecuador, in Guayaquil. Hacienda Victoria is the largest farm of fine flavor cocoa in Ecuador. And just so you know, there are around 5 million tons of cocoa in the world. 5% of this is fine flavor cocoa, which is also beans from Tanzania that Simran harvest and export. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hacienda Victoria. Ecuador holds around 60 to 70% of that fine flavor cocoa that people are looking. And one of the challenges is to develop a product that is consistent in the chocolate world. So Hacienda Victoria 11 years ago wanted to rescue the fine flavor cocoa in Ecuador, because a lot of the people growing cocoa here in Ecuador were growing higher yielding varieties that were not in the line of fine flavor. And we're a family-based company. And there's a lot of challenges in the cacao world. One of the things that you have to understand, in Ecuador, there's around 600,000 hectares of cocoa. It's the largest agricultural product that is planted in the country. We hold around close to 300,000 growers of cacao. And these growers have a challenging thing in making a quality of life. So one of the aspects that we focus is that we want us as growers try to develop a better quality of life for our workers than from them being farmers, okay? Because as farmers of cocoa, they've been historically a long time here in Ecuador, and there's a lot of challenges for them to have a good quality of life. So our focus is a little bit different from most of the industry. We're trying to build farms that are large and focus on our team of people. With that, we focus on workshops for them, how to manage their finances, health. We also focus on their education. We work with a lot of schools in the communities around us, focusing more on the level of educations at the schools and also a little bit of the infrastructure. And we comply with most of the requests from the industry in terms of sustainability, environment, and social aspects at the farm, which is now also very challenging. Right now, we export around 1,200 tons, and we are growing more. Our main markets is Japan, then Europe, US. We also export to Latin America. And basically, we focus on the whole concept of traceability of the bean, and we try to tailor-make the quality of the organoleptic profile for each client. So because we control the harvesting inside the farm, we can go into the fermentation area with the same variety of cacao and tailor-made the formula or the recipe for each client. So for example, we have 5 clients in Japan. They all buy the same bean, but because of the protocol fermentation we do for them, they each have a particular flavor in their bean. Some of them can be more powerful, a little bit more acid, more astringent, depending on what the client is asking for. So we're working with a lot of premium beans buyers from Europe. We also work with a lot of 3 Michelin star restaurants in the world. We are very passionate of what we're doing. We see a lot of potential in what we're doing, and the markets are growing.
Great. Can I ask you exactly, you say you work with Michelin restaurants and you work with, let's say, bean-to-bar makers. Let's say if you had to characterize where your main market is in terms of buyers, like do you work mostly through importers and then that reaches bean-to-bar makers? Do you work directly? What is the most common way that you're working? Do you work with bigger manufacturers? What is your clientele?
So it is a mix, but the consumer itself is educating its palate. So I've been here 11 years now, and I've always hear about cacao and chocolate is going to be like wine or coffee. And I haven't seen that change yet. You know, it's happening, but it's happening very slowly.
Yeah.
So, you know, the job, for example, that Simran is doing in Tanzania and other people are doing around the world is helping, you know, communicate that. So basically right now, if you're talking for large volumes, like the ones we are in for fine flavor cocoa beans, it is a large volume to export 1,200 tons that are consistent in flavor. So we work with basically buyers that are buying 300, 200 tons, and they are, you know, companies that are quite a size, you know, that are looking for premium beans to do something very selective in their pipeline. But then you have these small bean-to-bar or bean-to-bar chocolate makers, and then you have the restaurants as well. And we see these, you know, synergies like ambassadors. So the people that are buying these beans are communicating more closely to consumers how to really eat a piece of chocolate, you know, and people are learning that. But in order for this change to happen, you needed to have companies or projects that where you can find beans that are consistent and that are good quality. So it's the first time I've been a panelist with Simran, and I hear that he's maybe 9 years old. We're 11 years old. So if you see that, just by that, we're very young in terms of you know, changing the consumer's perspective. So this change is happening, and it's going to happen, but it's going to take a little bit more time.
Got it. Andres, you mentioned something that is interesting, which is the trajectory of cacao in relation to other products, coffee, wine, etc. And I wanted to ask you a question, then I'll ask to Simran as well. Has COVID in the last 2 years affected this trajectory, and how so for your business and in your perception?
Yes, I think it halted the sales because, of course, you know, one of the first things that was affected was premium products. I mean, people needed to kind of like look what they needed to spend. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty. So basically, when the pandemic hit, we had to inventory about 20 to 30% of our sales, of our beans in our warehouse. This year, we have seen a little bit of positive reaction. And now in the second semester, we're basically seeing a lot of movement in terms of that. But I think if I can answer direct your question, it basically, we have lost maybe a year and a half of growth in terms of market. That's how I see it from my perspective.
Yeah. Thanks. Simran, can you comment on the COVID and post-COVID, like if we can call it post-COVID situation in your perception?
Yeah, the timing for us actually worked out okay. You know, our main season runs from June through December, January, and when sort of lockdown started hitting in sort of February, March 2020, we'd sold out of our 2019 stock and we hadn't started our 2020 season yet. I think the frustrating or the scariest part was sort of March 2020. We didn't know if we should be producing 20 tons or 200 tons in 2020. You You know, a lot of our customers thought they would go out of business. A lot of them were very nervous and had difficulty in planning. In the end, I think 0 of our customers went out of business because of COVID, and the majority of them saw growth. I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people in the West, which is our biggest market, leaned quite hard into supporting their local sort of smaller businesses, which are our eventual ultimate customer base. A lot of people bored at home, locked up, scrolling through Instagram, you know, treating themselves to, you can't go out for a meal, so treat yourself to some fancy chocolate, and just the amount of outpouring that went into trying to support small local businesses, I think wound up helping our client base not only survive but actually able to do some growth. So that, coupled with Tanzania's initial response to COVID, which was fairly unique in the world, meant that there were essentially no restrictions in the country, just the ones that we put in ourselves to ensure that our staff and our supply network was safe, meant that we were able to continue fairly business as usual, to be honest, with that extreme exception being, you know, not able to attend trade shows, not able to host customer visits. But again, being where we are geographically, it's actually quite hard for us and expensive for us to attend many trade shows in person, and with everything moving to virtual and online, it made it a little bit easier for us to attend. The big thing we missed out on was we enjoy hosting chocolate makers to come visit, and I think that's a strong actually marketing and sales platform or opportunity, and that wasn't an option for us.
This is a good connection to the next part of the session, which is exactly about relationships, which is maybe just to recap a little bit, that we got a lot of questions on that, Simran and Andres. Like, we got a lot of questions on how to identify buyers, how to do this first approach, how to decide if this buyer is for you or not, and how to maintain the relationship. Of course, this is a key point in this in the European market or any international market that you want to talk about. I wanted to know from you guys, maybe Andres, you can start by telling us maybe how you guys have managed to identify buyers and how to develop a relationship that is long-lasting for Hacienda Victoria and for yourself.
Yeah, at the beginning, this was very challenging because Ecuador's reputation of quality, was hit very badly because there's a lot of mix with beans. Maybe one thing that I want to point out, that people need to understand that really cacao is behaving like wine. So there's different varieties of cacao that you can ferment and develop different types of chocolate. So Ecuador has different varieties of cacao, and we focus on that. We are planting different varieties and developing its own recipe and formula for the buyer. But at the beginning, so people didn't believe that we could deliver a high quality bean because Ecuador had a bad reputation. So we needed to create that confidence back again, especially, for example, in our main market, the Japanese market, which tends to be a little bit slow in their decision making. And they didn't believe. So I remember one visit from a buyer that we told them, listen, we're planting this bean here, and we had a 500-hectare farm at the time, and we kind of like show him around the farm, and then we finished, and then he said, yes, listen, now I want to go ahead and walk the whole farm, because he did not believe that we have planted that variety, that only variety in the farm, because it was low yield variety. So people didn't have the confidence that we could deliver a high quality bean. So it was hard to kind of like connect to the buyers and developing that confidence. Now, 11 years from now, is a lot of word of mouth. Like people are using the bean, they're asking about, telling about the bean, and then we have another buyer that is coming to the farm asking for to buy beans. Now, for us at the moment, you know, there's a limited amount of beans that we can ship, and we have more buyers than we want. So things are good. So the Japanese market, we're basically working with 80% of the buyers there, and the reason we do not send more to Japan is that we want to be diversified in different markets. You know, we want to have Japan market, European market, and that's basically to be responsible. But so we identify the buyer. At the beginning, we were looking for them, you know, asking around. Then it's just like kind of like natural word of mouth, social media sometimes. But buyers are just right now coming in and asking for the beans and looking for us more than us looking for them.
Got it. And when you were searching actively for buyers, what were some of the platforms or database or whatever that were most useful to you to search
so
for?
Basically, a lot of, you know, kind of like seminars outside, or you know, kind of like fairs outside. Go there, look for the people that were making chocolate, and also the web browser, you know, looking for them, researching for them, and basically when you connect to 2-3 key ones, and you start selling, and your bean does the talking, then everything just kind of like sets to a domino effect.
Exactly. Quality can take you a long way because it's like an invitation card almost. It's like speaks for itself, as you said. That's very interesting. To create the track record is super key here. As you said, 11 years of working with quality. Simran, did you guys have a similar experience in identifying, finding buyers? Because I guess you also had to build a country name as well. How did it go for you guys?
Yeah, we did, and it was definitely a challenge our first couple of years. You know, it was a lot of, like Andres said, a lot of Googling and searching to see who's a potential customer, and you know, it's tough. At least back then, it was tough to understand who was necessarily buying cocoa beans versus buying, you know, couverture or something else from or cocoa mass. So sort of sifting through that was tough, and it was a lot of cold call emails. Our DHL bill for sending samples, you know, was astronomical our first few years. Our first customer we got in the end because I showed up at their door with a sample of beans in New York and knocked on their door and asked if I could come in, you know. Our first European customers we got because I attended Chocoa back in 2014, maybe it was 2013, I forget, and because they were kind enough to give us a pretty big discount on our booth, and so I had a booth there, and I didn't know, you know, and someone was lucky enough to come by, express interest, and take some samples, and you know, get in contact with us. I will say that I think it would be a lot harder, maybe not a lot harder, but it would be somewhat harder to be starting now than when we started. I think there's a lot more good beans on the market than there were 10 years ago or 9 years ago. And I think that, but on the other hand, there are also easier distribution channels than there were 10 years ago too. So maybe I take that back. These days, we find a lot of our customers will come to us either through one of our distributors or finding out about us through social media or another chocolate maker reaching out to us, and then we put them in touch with the distributor. I don't know if you wanted me to move on to the maintaining the relationship part of this slide. Or...
Yeah, and I also wanted to know the difference between establishing this relationship through a distributor and directly with the chocolate maker, with the big maker. That's an interesting aspect as well. But go ahead, like just.
Yeah, let me speak to that first, if that's all right, Andres. Yes, so we, like, for example, in Europe, we actually do very few direct sales ourselves. We work with our distributors, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a direct relationship with the chocolate maker customers. You know, a lot of them have been out to visit us. I'll WhatsApp or email with a lot of them regularly. It's just that if you're not buying a full container of beans, it typically makes more sense to to buy it from our distributor who already has the beans in stock in Europe. I think buying, a couple of pallets directly from Tanzania, the only people who make any money on that is the logistics companies. So we encourage our European customers to work with our existing distributors. It's quicker, it'll wind up cheaper, and logistically much easier. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a direct relationship. It just means that the beans are physically already in Europe and coming from one of our distributors there. And I think that's a key aspect. And that also plays back into quality and relationships, in that, you can't just think, oh, my beans have been sold to distributor X in the Netherlands, not my problem, right? I still have to work hard on maintaining those sales directly with the customers. If there's issues with quality, I have to take ownership of that, unless there was some sort of damage in transit or in the warehousing, but that has to come from that. Ultimately, the buck stops with us. And so I think just because they are technically, the chocolate maker is paying the logistics company and receiving the beans from the distributor, and the beans are coming from them, that doesn't mean that the producer is not an extremely active part of that relationship.
Got it. I'll give the word to Andres maybe to comment on that, because maybe you want to comment on something that maintaining the relationship, or how you deal with that part.
Well, in terms of distribution, it's very similar. I think that once you have the quality in place, and then environment and social responsibilities also come into place, producers like us become from price takers to like price makers. So basically, in the past, the trading companies were just telling the growers how much they wanted to pay for that fine flavor cocoa. Now I see the partnerships that we have. For example, we have a warehouse in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and we have a warehouse in Oakland in the US. And I see the people we work with, like for example, Gaia in the Netherlands, they're more like a logistic partner for us. So we basically set up a fee for the logistic and a fee for their administrative work. But we're basically setting that. We're not just taking the price they're giving to us, because the product is the one that is making the position there. So, and then like Simran was saying, that doesn't leave us behind with the relationship of the clients. I mean, we're the ones communicating with the clients, and we're just telling the clients, my beans are in this warehouse, and how much do you want? And the logistic partner will just basically send them that. But the ones that are doing, the work in the relationship is us. So for example, Victoria has about 25, 30 clients, and depending on the year. And I have to be talking to them every month, and that's the relationship we build. So it's a very close relationship that is like one-to-one.
Yeah, and you're outsourcing the logistical part also to make it easier for them to get access to your beans. I guess that's what I understood, right? You manage the relationship, and you make the logistics easy for them to get access to the product.
And for us, because to handle a portfolio of 10 growers or 10 bean to bar makers, and we have to worry about sending that amount of beans every month, is just a lot of work. So it is a win-win situation, and we have to recognize that to the logistic partner. But it is different from a trading company in the past, that they basically wanted to go inside our business and take part of the profit. So it's a different type right now.
Got it.
I think we have a little bit of a different relationship with our distributors, in that they will also find customers for us. It's not purely me finding the customers. It's also, like some of our distributors will really be pushing our beans. If they may have a client that is using, Andres' beans, and they say, oh, I'm also looking for a bean with this flavor profile. Do you have anything? And I'll say, absolutely, you should try Cocoa Camille or something like that. So it does go both ways for us, I think, a little bit. And I think part of that is also, I might be wrong, but I think we supply a lot of much smaller chocolate makers than Hacienda Victoria does, potentially. So I think that sort of can be part of it as well. But just to echo again what Andres was saying, is that the relationships with the chocolate makers, talking to them as often as possible, I think is just incredibly important.
Yeah, just one thing to add there, you know, same happens to us, you know, the logistic partner also helps us sometimes looking for other bean-to-bar buyers, and we do not measure our clients in terms of you know, size, because our smallest client will buy 1 bag, which is, and our largest client will buy 350 tons. Mm-hmm. So, and what it makes that easy is the logistic partner, because, you know, they can send 1 bag. If the client is good enough, it represents our product, we will go with it. I mean, it's for us, it's good.
Let me ask you this, Chris. With your logistics partners, you still have ownership of the beans when they're sitting in the warehouse in Europe, or are they paying you upfront for it?
No, we have ownership of those beans. In the case of the US, we do, because you have you know, kind of like banking tools, we do get a deposit for those beans. But basically, in order for them to deliver the beans, they have to get our okay to do it. So those beans are our property.
And yeah, and so for us, that's not how we do it. You know, we're a smaller company. We don't necessarily have the same cash flow mechanisms in place. So for us, we get paid FOB for our beans, which our distributors are buying and then selling on. You know,
which transfer the ownership, right?
Eventually, would like to get to the point that Hacienda Victoria is at, but we're not there yet. You know, one day.
Yeah, interesting. 2 different business models, and I think in both cases, as you guys mentioned, the logistics partner or the distributor feels confident to also recommend you guys to other clients, and I think this is part of this, having established a relationship and the track record, regardless of the business model that you guys are using. Let me just move on to the next subject, and we can still discuss these things because they are interrelated, the relationships, but I'll ask my colleague Lisanne to introduce the subject.
Yes, next topic is our buyer requirements. On the one hand, of course, you have the legal requirements that you have to comply with to actually be able to access the European market or to any international or regional market. We made a study laying down all these European legislation and food safety amounts. So we put the link here so you can actually access that to have a read yourself. Here, I would like to talk a bit more about the additional buyer requirements. We already mentioned it. I think Andres mentioned it in the beginning very clearly about the sustainability issues that, yeah, nowadays you have to comply with, and even to enter the European market, it's becoming a must to show your sustainability commitments. So maybe Andres, to start with you, the question is how you are preparing yourself to meet the sustainability requirements.
Well, first, there are certifications that some of the clients are asking and the industry is asking, and we kind of think ourselves that we go beyond that, but definitely you have certifications like rainforest UTZ. UTZ is more used now in Europe. Rainforest was more used in the US, but now they've merged to develop one certificate. So we work around that. The certification comes and check for several things in terms of social aspects, how you're treating your team, how you're behaving with the environment, and things like that. But sometimes these are kind of like one icing all the crops, you know, because these certificates, they work for bananas plantations, they work for cacao, they work for coffee. So there are differences between crops and you know, they need to adjust. So I'm not too much in favor of the certification, but I do have it because some of the clients requested, in order to go to some markets or supermarkets or some shelves. But we are very responsible with our team, the people that help us in the farming of the cacao beans. So we kind of like comply with more structural things. We are, for example, right now in terms of environment, doing a rescue of an endangered species in the region we're at, and then we're also working on carbon neutrality. We see that as the next thing that is going to help our customers have a comparative advantage, and that is something that is not yet being requested by the industry. Then you have to comply as well with heavy metals and other types of things that the market is also requesting, chemical residue and things like that.
Yeah, so maybe referring to that, because of course certification on the one hand is almost a stamp. It's a straightforward way to show your commitment to certain sustainability issues. And the other things you mentioned, like the carbon neutrality, etc., is it's a bit it could be less straightforward. So my question is, how do you communicate these kind of commitments to your clients, customers? Yeah.
Well, we basically just we don't communicate that unless you're like a client for us. Then we give you like the whole all the things we're doing inside the farm, So they will come and for example, in heavy metals, we're working with a Belgian university in order to have a compliance in terms of controlling heavy metals. So we will share that with our buyers and how we're dealing with these issues. How do they have to feel safe that they will not have any complication? And so far, there's no, in the 11 years we have been shipping beans, we have luckily not been having a problem with in terms of chemical residue or heavy metals. So we communicate directly with the client with all the certification we have. And then the certification, which is rainforest and UTZ, basically that's a public certificate that everybody can see that we have it and they know.
Great. Yeah, I'm very curious from Simran to hear how he approaches the whole theme of sustainability and also specifically certification. Simran.
So on certification, the only certificate that we hold is organic. And to be honest with you, our sort of client base has tended to move beyond, I think, the certifications. Like Andres said, I think a lot of people recognize that these certifications are imperfect, but their supermarkets, their sales channels require them. I think a lot of our customer base is sort of more, sort of goes a step beyond and sort of is willing to doesn't put much stock into some of these UTZ rainforest, fair trade certifications anymore, and they just want a greater level of transparency from us at origin, and so we provide that. In terms of the food safety stuff, every shipment that we send to Europe, I think, gets tested for, every organic certified gets tested for any pesticide chemical residue. Every shipment gets tested for heavy metals. We're fortunate that we don't have any sort of cadmium issues in Tanzania. But yeah, in terms of the sustainability aspect, we actually don't really do much on the certification. It's more of a making sure that we're able to tell our story to our client base. But it's tough. We definitely have had potential clients, bigger clients, saying, hey, are you UTZ certified? Because we only need UTZ certified. And then we explain that we're not because of X, Y, and Z. And they say, okay, great, but we need UTZ certified. And if we ever really did have a very serious conversation with someone who required one of those certifications, then we would get it. We started the company, we knew we would eventually have to get organic certified, but in our first couple of years with the volumes we had, our client base understood that our farmers were farming as per organic protocols, but so they didn't require that we had the certification. And then we eventually got customers who said, look, we get it, but we want to be able to sell into the German organic supermarkets or into Whole Foods, and so we get it, but like same as what Andres said, we get it, but and so that's why we first established the organic certification.
Yeah, can I make one more comment there? Because I think it has to do also with these 9 years of change. At the end, you know, our relationship with our customers is more face to face. So once they visit our, you know, processes and our plantations, they understand they don't need this type of certifications. I mean, we are doing much more further work on those issues. But because when you're talking to large companies that they do not know even where they're buying from, you know, then that stamp is probably makes sense. But, you know, for us, it's not about the certification. And then our buyers understand that that doesn't talk about our principles or about our ethics work in terms of how we're doing things.
Yeah, I guess when the chain is bigger and longer, it doesn't have a face, it has a stamp, right? And that's a little bit reactive. So you need that in order to, instead of proposing something to your buyer when you have the face-to-face contact, which is the more proactive way that you guys are working.
Yeah, I just want to include, because I'm also looking at the questions from the audience, and from two different people, we got a question about living income and living wage, because both of you have mentioned that you pay fair price to farmers. What does this mean, and do you include this idea or this concept of the living wage and living income? Maybe Simran, first to you.
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm not too familiar with the living wage stuff. I think it's hard to apply to, you know, for our farmers, most of our farmers, cocoa is a tertiary, if not further down the line crop. So someone may say, oh, your farmers are only earning, you know, $5 a day from cocoa. Saying, yeah, but the guy has, you know, 15 cocoa trees around his house. You know, he's really earning his money from his 5 acres of rice that he's farming. But what we do know is that we pay by far the highest price for cocoa in the area. Last year when we closed, our pricing was 51% above the going rate. I think our pricing when we closed was equivalent, I have to check, but I think it was equivalent to what landed New York prices were. And we're able to do that because we sell into this premium market, right? If we were trying to sell cocoa onto the commodity market, we'd have a harder time, but because of our client base, we are able to pay a much higher price to our farmers. Yeah, and the price you pay is much, you know, the price that we are paid is much higher than the fair trade minimum price floor, than the fair trade price premium, and the price we pay is much more than the fair trade price as well.
Yeah, in terms of you know, our beans, first we need to understand that Ecuador is probably top two, top three in the region in Latin America of the highest minimum wage in Latin America. You know, we're a country that is dollarized, so we have the dollar as a currency. But in terms of average, we pay around 20% more than the minimum wage to our team and our people in the farm. But that doesn't include bonuses that they also get in terms of, we have a doctor in place for them, you know, during all working hours, that it's also included for the family members. We give them 3 meals per day for free without charging them. You get the workshops, the educations. There are some, we kind of like give a scholarship to some of their kids. So there are also things that are an advantage, and our turnover for our team is less than 1%. So basically, people don't want to go out. There are people that want to go in, and I think that speaks a lot of what we do for our people in our farm.
Yeah, Andres, just to clarify, because you're paying a salary, you're not buying the cacao from other producers. Just to clarify to the audience, I don't know if this was clear before. You work in a system where you have workers in your farm, and you're paying the wages, and it's different from Simran that actually is buying the product from the farmer network, right? So just to put the discussion in different levels also.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Lisanne, any other questions?
Well, many questions, but maybe we can continue to the next topic. I'm looking at the time, and then
go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, next topic is the product and business promotion. It's about how to stand out in the crowd, how to get your message across, how to attract the attention of potential buyers. We have talked about it already during the whole webinar. But it is about that you're not only selling cacao, you're also selling story or sharing a story. And the question is, how do you demonstrate that? And I think Gustavo, if you can introduce the first question and the slides we have with that.
Yeah, I think we discussed a lot of these things indirectly. We were saying that quality takes you a long way, etc. Maybe to bring it down to earth a little bit in terms of tools that you guys use. What are the main tools? Let's start maybe with Andres. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're promoting that to clients and the tools that are most useful to you to show what you're doing on the field?
Well, basically most of it's social media, all the platforms that we can use are helping a lot, especially during the pandemic. It even helped more still. So basically we developed some content and we start sharing what we're doing, we start sharing what our people are saying, and that's our biggest platform. Then the next one is what I told you before, basically word of mouth. People using our quality are saying to another one, hey, listen, this is basically great, go ahead and try it, and then we establish another relationship. So and we always tell the buyer that for us is the most important thing is to visit the farm, because the farm is our best seller. It sells by itself. And the work we do, and if they talk to our people, I mean, that's the best way to really communicate what we're doing.
Great. We have seen, let's say, in the last years, also maybe due to the pandemic, a lot of the chocolate makers we talk to and a lot of the buyers we talk to here on the market as well, in terms of distributors, etc., they are using Instagram to identify new concepts, new farms, new producers, etc. Do you get a lot of response, and do you get a lot of feedback on your Instagram account?
Yes, there is a person in charge of this, and they get a lot of questions, especially from startups, in terms of bean to bar, that they want to get. Now there is a whole new thing, called TikTok now, that's like another generation. I don't even understand it yet. But we understand we are going to eventually have to move there, but that's a platform we're not using right now. The ones you show here, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, are the ones we're using, and it's great. And there's a lot of feedback from people.
TikTok, I think, is about sending short messages, very concise, very fast. If you have to talk about the main messages you're trying to communicate to your buyers in a few words, how would you characterize it? How would you quickly describe in a TikTok way the message that you communicate through your social media?
Well, we really want to focus on the quality and the consistency of our product. It's hard to do because, really you have to see the work we're doing. But just to set you an example, I mean, about 40%, 30% of people in Ecuador are already millennials, and they're not using most of the platforms we're seeing here. I mean, they are communicating mostly through the other platform. So that's a generational gap there that we need to understand and really consider. So
yeah, that's interesting. So quality for you would be the main thing that you're trying to communicate through. And of course, I saw a lot of in your YouTube, a lot of testimonies and like getting to know the people who work on the farm, etc. Right? You also have that aspect on the
a lot of testimonial from the people of the work we're doing in terms of endangered species, in terms of the social community work, that thing. Because sometimes when you're trying to communicate that, you can say it, but you're basically being your own judge. So it's more important for people to see it. It will be the best thing. But if other people working in the farm are saying it works better.
Exactly. Thank you, Andres. And maybe I will pose the same question to Simran here. What are the most impactful social media or channels for the promotion of your products and of Cocoa Camille? And what has been your experience using them?
Yeah, I mean, the most impactful, I think, similar with Andres, is when we have people come out to visit, but it's hard. You know, Tanzania is fairly far away from most of the markets, and we are then a 12-hour drive from the closest international airport. So it's a bit of a struggle. Otherwise, the important way is just our in-person attendance at trade shows when we're able to, or just, you know, visiting chocolate makers around the world when we're able to. In terms of social media, we do rely on it a fair amount. Instagram is by far the most important one for us. You know, hi Andres says, I think we're a little bit, I don't want to assume your age, Andres, but I think we're a little bit beyond the TikTok generation, for now at least. You know, when TikTok becomes uncool, we'll join. But Instagram, I think, and I was just scrolling through on the side, the posts that we have that have the most engagement, and they actually tend to be a little bit different from what someone may expect. It's not so much, you know, photos of cocoa trees or photos of beans. It's one when we get a little bit more into the detail about what we have. Like that second picture you show is about how we are able to offer bags in 30 kilo shipments, and people get, you know, excited about that, because the engagement that, you know, it's nice to have whatever how many followers we have, but the thing that I really care about is the engagement, and in particular the engagement from chocolate makers, right? Yeah. And so I found that what they tend to care about most is when we go into a little bit of the weeds about or the details about our processes, our practices, you know, something like these 30 kg bags, or something like, sorry, let me just 1 second, let me see what has received a lot of engagement. It's, you know, yeah, that we line our containers with, you know, 5-ply cardboard instead of craft paper, you know. Average person scrolling through Instagram doesn't care at all about paper or cardboard, but our kind of chocolate makers, customers are interested by that kind of stuff, you know, and it's important to explain those kind of things, I think, because it shows our commitment to quality, it shows our commitment to attention to detail, and it also shows the extra costs that go into producing the kinds of beans for our kind of chocolate makers than commodity cocoa, you know. You're talking about filling the hold of a vessel with beans not in bags versus, you know, spending $300 on cardboard per 20-foot container to make sure that the beans arrive in good conditions, you know. Yeah, so that's been important for us. Instagram is important. Facebook a bit less so these days, maybe when we started 10 years ago or 9 years ago. And I think that, but still, you know, like Hacienda Victoria, the most important thing is for people, the best way to tell our story is for people to come over and to see it. But we recognize that not everyone international travel is expensive. Not everyone is able to do that, or to take the time to come see us is, you know, like I said, it's a day's drive at least each direction. Not everyone has that luxury, so we try to do as good a job of telling our story over media that people around the world are able to access more easily.
Got it. Can I just ask you a question on how it works exactly? If someone sends you a message, like a bean to bar maker sends you a message, how do you proceed? Like, just so that the audience and everyone can understand exactly how that message can take you a long way. Like, how do you proceed when you get like a request?
Yeah, I mean, I manage our Instagram, so, you know, like yesterday, someone emailed, WhatsApp me, hi, or Instagram message, hi, do you deliver to Kenya? And I say, yes, of course, you know, please send me an email at this address. And then, you know, email, they ask us our price, they ask us, you know, or if I ask them where they are, if it's not clear, if they're in Europe, I say, yes, we're able to, like, but I suggest that you talk to one of our distributors. Do you know XYZ? If not, more than happy to make an introduction for you. But I will say, all of this aside, accessing the premium chocolate market for a bean producer or a new bean producer, or someone who's trying to access the premium market for the first time, I believe that these days the best way to do that is to work with one of these distributors that are already selling into the premium market. You know, talking to one of these these guys, getting one of them on board with your beans is going to be the best way to be able to sort of materialize some sales for someone who's new, I think. Yeah.
Got it. No, that's
Because, there were two things I did want to mention, which were there was a question we didn't touch on about cultural differences with our buyers in Europe as opposed to around the world. And I have faced a couple of those over the years. I feel like initially in the early days, I see our segment of the market in sort of two camps. There's a lot of this sort of old school French and Italian premium chocolate makers who've been buying beans for 100 years. And then there's this new wave of young hipster chocolate makers, a lot of them coming from the coffee world or from the premium food world and then venturing into chocolate. And when we started, I think that it was definitely very, very hard for us to access that previous, old school chocolate. And I would get questions of like, well, who the hell are you? Why should I buy your beans? And I think that we even had chocolate makers who said, great, sounds good, sounds interesting, beans look nice. Like if you're still here in 3 years, we can have another conversation and I totally understand that, customers aren't willing to establish new recipes, new product launches, new SKUs, get their customers on board until there's a proven track record that we actually have some staying power. If you're going to go through all that effort and then 2 years down the line, we get bored or our business fails, we decide to do something else, then that customer's sunk all that time and money into developing this new product range, and then it hasn't wound up becoming to anything. The other challenge that I particularly face, and that has been working with distributors in Europe has helped me a lot, is that honestly language. My French is pretty bad, and so initially it was very hard for me to break into the French market. Luckily, through the great partners that we have in Europe, we were able to sort of make some inroads into there, but it was definitely a challenge for us. Yeah.
So the diversity also of the European market makes it a little bit difficult to decodify it maybe sometimes, or decode it. I think that's the correct word. Andres, do you want to comment on this question also, because you didn't get the opportunity to earlier?
No, basically it's a little bit of the same of the things that Simran has lived. I mean, there's a lot of challenges in terms of tradition, especially in Europe. I agree with everything he said. I mean, I think that we need to be a little bit patient. I mean, there are chocolate makers that have been doing chocolate for, like he said, hundreds of years in Europe, and we need to understand that we're the new boys in town. Saying that we have a better product or a great product that they've been worked before, and we need to understand that tradition to kind of like disrupt it. Is going to be a little bit difficult because they have been doing this for several more years than we have. We're coming with this great product. We believe in this great product, and that's the same thing that I'm telling you about the challenging of the change. But once one client in one country, one buyer in one country starts buying your beans, then the one that has developed for 100 years that product can say, okay, my product is not as good as the one that now this other person is doing. So now he has to come to us and start talking to us. And that takes time, but it's happening.
You said something interesting, which is also to characterize the buyer that you're talking to. Is it a very traditional buyer that is going to open up that opportunity for you, or you're talking to, like, let's say, a new bean-to-bar company? So I guess the way to communicate and to convince the different buyers is also playing a role here on how to approach and how to kind of, articulate the right message before the different types of buyers, which is like, it can vary. And as Simran said, like, the European market is so diverse in that respect that understanding who's who is quite relevant here.
I have a question from the audience about the channels we just saw, and the question is actually, both in Coco Camini and in Hacienda Victoria, who is in charge of these social media marketing and answering? Andres, maybe.
Okay, so I'm a workaholic, so I have a person in charge of the social media, but I'm overlooking every social media. So I'm in every social media, so I will check all messages as well. But sometimes I'm not the one answering them. Sometimes I am. So we have two people there, myself and another person. And the reason I am overseeing that is at the end, this is a face-to-face relationship. And I always want to be the one answering to whoever is interested in our product, you know, because I am the one that really knows the whole channel. You know, I just don't want to, like a salesperson talking to that to the buyer. You know, I know my product. I started this farm from the beginning, so I know its roots. So that is a little bit different to communicate. Yeah.
And for Simran?
Yeah, so at Cocoa Committee, I am our sales department and our marketing department. So we finally had someone come help to take some photos, but all of the Instagram and Facebook, unfortunately, is me. So that's probably why we don't have as many followers as we could do. You know, I'm not the best at it, but it's me. We're not, yeah.
Andres, Simran, if you guys need new pictures, Lisanne and we can volunteer to go visit you guys and take some
Exactly,
pictures.
yeah. With some good stories.
Some good stories.
Yeah, maybe because I think we it's also in 1 minute. The time is up. Maybe one last question, and this is about certification, specifically maybe Simran, because you said that the only certification you have is organic, because you feel that in the market segment where you're working in, the other certification standards are not necessarily required or demanded by your buyers. Does this mean that organic is required, and do you see an increase there? Yeah, what's your experience with that?
Yes, in my experience, that for us and our customer base, organic is required. That's why we do it. If it wasn't required, we would not do it. Yeah.
What is the aspect of organic in specialty? Like, is it about the consumer safety? Is it the perception of being healthier? What is the driver that you see that is behind this?
Our chocolate makers' driver behind it is their sales channels.
Yeah.
You know, people say, like in America, we've had customers say, "Look, we get it, but Whole Foods says we need it." And I imagine from the consumer's viewpoint, it's a combination. You know, I think food safety is a big one, but I think also, you know, the perception that organic agriculture is better for the world than non-organic, right or wrong that may be, which I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. This was so interesting for me, and I guess for all of us. Yeah, well, usually Jantien would end the session, but given that she's not here, yeah, I just want to say again, thanks so much. There were some additional questions specific to Andres or Simran. If you don't mind, we could just forward them to you by email. Yeah, Gustavo, I don't know if you want to say something.
Indeed, just to thank you guys so much for sharing your experiences. For us and for the audience, this 1 hour and a little bit is really valuable. We shared so much information and I learned a lot as well. And just to remind everyone, this will be posted on CBI website to have access to it. And just again, thank you, Andres. Thank you, Simran. This is, yeah, this was great conversation. And keep in touch. And again, Lisanne and I will volunteer to go visit you guys to have the face-to-face also relationship develop. But yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.